August of 1952, and the heat rising off them clay roads in Cypress Hollow made everything shimmer like a lie. I was checking my trap lines along Broken Creek when I saw that burlap sack caught in the willow roots. Figured it was a drowned raccoon, maybe some old clothes folks had tossed. Then I heard it, soft as a dove's wing, desperate as a dying man's prayer. Mama. What I pulled from that creek made me believe in pure evil. A baby girl, blue as winter frost, lips cracked, barely breathing. But that wasn't the worst of it. When I unwrapped that wet burlap and saw her face, saw what they'd thrown away like garbage, I understood why someone wanted her dead. I'm an old man now, and my hands still shake when I think about that morning. By the time the sun set 3 days later, I'd be standing in front of 20 men with torches, a rifle in my hands, and that baby sleeping behind me. One of us wasn't walking away. The morning started like any other, up before dawn, coffee black as sin, hands already shaking before I even picked up the cup. Shell shock, the docs called it. Got worse when I was rattled. Been that way since Korea, since I held my best friend Jimmy Patterson while he bled out in a foxhole outside Incheon. But that's another story. I'd been working the timber mill for going on 12 years, ever since I came back with a Purple Heart and nightmares that wouldn't quit. Lost my wife Emily and our baby girl to childbirth in 47. She bled out while Doc Henderson fumbled around like a damn fool, and the baby never took her first breath. After that, I figured God was telling me plain as day, Elwood Mathers wasn't meant to be a father. So I kept to myself, worked the mill, built that little cabin 2 miles out where nobody had to look at me and I didn't have to look at nobody. Thunder, my old gelding, was picking his way along the creek bank, calm as Sunday morning, when he stopped sudden, ears pricked forward, nostrils flaring. That horse had carried me through worse terrain than this in Korea. When he said something was wrong, I listened. That's when I saw it. The sack, floating there in the shallows, caught up in them willow roots like it was trying to hide from the current. Moving just slightly, bobbing with the water, I dismounted, boots sinking into the mud, and waded in. Water was cold even in August. That creek ran deep from the springs up in the hills. The rope around the top was tied with a sailor's knot, pulled tight. Whoever did this knew what they were doing, meant for that sack to sink and stay sunk. My hands were shaking worse as I worked the knot loose. Took me 3 tries. Inside was a baby. Lord have mercy, maybe 8, 9 months old. Blonde hair plastered to her skull, skin like marble, lips blue as a drowned man's. But her eyes were open, looking right at me. Old eyes, eyes that had seen things no baby should ever see. And she whispered it again, so faint I almost missed it. Mama, I've seen men die. I watched half my platoon get torn apart by Chinese artillery. Held my own wife's hand while the life drained out of her. But this tiny thing, fighting to live when someone had tied her up like trash and thrown her away to drown, that broke something in me I didn't even know was still whole. I wrapped her in my coat, hands shaking so bad I could barely manage it, and climbed back on Thunder. That baby wasn't crying anymore, wasn't making any sound at all, just staring up at me with them old eyes, her little fist wrapped around my shirt button like she was holding on to the last solid thing in the world. "Hold on, little one," I said, and I don't know if I was talking to her or myself. Just hold on. I kicked Thunder into a gallop. Hadn't ridden that hard since the war. Trees blurred past, branches whipping at my face, but I didn't slow down. The baby's breathing was getting shallower. Her skin was going from blue to gray. I pressed her tighter against my chest, trying to share whatever heat I had left. Beatrice Caldwell's house sat at the edge of town, white clapboard with green shutters and a garden that could feed half of Cypress Hollow if she'd a mind to share. Bea was our town nurse, trained up in Atlanta before the war, came back to take care of her daddy when he took sick with the cancer. She'd delivered my daughter. Held Emily's hand when the bleeding wouldn't stop. We hadn't spoken more than 2 words since that day. Too many ghosts standing between us. I pounded on her door hard enough to rattle the frame. "Bea, I need help." She opened it in her house dress, gray hair and curlers, reading glasses halfway down her nose, took one look at the bundle in my arms and went white as church paint. "Sweet Jesus, Elwood." "What?" "Found her in the creek, tied up in a sack. She ain't breathing right." B didn't waste time with questions, just grabbed that baby from my arms and ran to her kitchen table, already barking orders like a field sergeant. Boil water. Get me clean towels. Move, Elwood. I watched her work, hands that knew their business, moving fast but sure. She cleared the baby's mouth, listened to her chest with a stethoscope, wrapped her in heated towels fresh from the stove. The whole time I just stood there dripping creek water on her clean floor, useless as tits on a boar hog. She's hypothermic, B said, not looking up. Been in that water a while. Dehydrated too, malnourished. Her voice was steady, professional. Then she pulled back the blanket fully and stopped cold. Oh, Lord have mercy. The baby had a cleft lip, split right up through her top lip, clear to her nose, making her little face look torn in two. Not all that uncommon. I'd seen it before on a corporal's kid back at Fort Campbell. But in a small southern town in 1952, it might as well have been the mark of Cain. That's why, I said quietly. That's why they threw her away. Bee's jaw tightened hard enough I could hear her teeth grind. She bent back to her work, warming that baby, checking her breathing, trying to get some sugar water into her with an eyedropper. After what felt like hours but was probably 20 minutes, the baby's color started coming back. Pink crept into her cheeks. Her breathing evened out. She even made a small sound, not quite a cry, more like a question. She's going to make it, B said, and I heard wonder in her voice. Real wonder. This baby wants to live, Elwood. She's a fighter. I reached out, let that tiny hand wrap around my finger. Her grip was stronger than it had any right to be. That's when we heard the dogs outside. Hunting dogs, from the sound of it. Baying like they'd caught a scent, and men's voices, getting closer, heavy boots on B's front porch. Someone was looking for something, or someone. B moved faster than I'd seen anyone move in years. She scooped that baby up, wrapped her tight in the heated towels, and shoved the whole bundle into my arms. Back door, now. My daddy's in the front room. He'll stall them. B, I can't just… You already did. Her eyes were fierce behind them reading glasses. The second you pulled her from that creek, you claimed her. Now go before they see you here. I went out the back way, keeping to the tree line. That baby pressed against my chest. She was warmer now, breathing steady, and she'd wrapped one tiny hand around the collar of my shirt, holding on like she knew her life depended on it. My place was 2 miles out, a cabin on mill property, nothing fancy. Just a bed, a stove, a table, and a front porch where I sat most nights whittling and trying to forget things I couldn't forget. Built it myself after Emily died. Couldn't stand to live in town no more. Couldn't stand the pity in folks' eyes every time they looked at me. I laid that baby on my bed. First time anyone besides me had been in it in 5 years. She looked so small against Emily's quilt, the one with the yellow stars she'd stitched while she was carrying our daughter. I stood there watching her sleep. This child I didn't know, whose name I didn't know, whose family had tried to murder her. The whittling knife was in my hand before I even knew I'd picked it up. Old habit, helps with the shaking. I sat in my chair and started carving, letting my hands work while my mind tried to catch up to what I'd done. By the time the sun was high overhead, I'd finished a small horse. Rough work, but you could tell what it was meant to be. When the baby woke up, fussy and scared in a strange place, I gave it to her. She grabbed it with both hands, stuck it straight in her mouth, and settled right down, just like that. Reckon you need a name, I said to her. Can't keep calling you baby if you're gonna stay here. She looked at me with them blue eyes, serious as a hanging judge. How about Hope? That seem fitting to you? She smiled then. Even with that torn lip, even with everything that had been done to her, she smiled at me, and something in my chest that had been frozen solid since Korea started to thaw. B showed up around supper time with a basket full of supplies, formula, diapers, bottles, little dresses. Didn't ask permission, just came right in and started teaching me things. How to test the bottle temperature on my wrist, how to fold a diaper so the pin didn't stick her, how to burp her without getting spit up all down my back. You're a natural disaster at this, B said, but there was a smile in her voice. Never had the chance to learn, I said quietly. Her hand touched my shoulder, light as a bird landing. I know, Elwood. But you're learning now. That evening, after B left, I sat in my rocking chair with Hope in my arms. She'd drunk 4 ounces of formula. B said that was good for her size, and fallen asleep mid-bottle, milk dribbling down her chin. I should have put her in the drawer I'd lined with blankets, my makeshift crib, but I couldn't make myself let go of her. Outside, I heard it. Thunder, but not the kind from clouds, the kind that comes from horses' hooves and men riding hard. I counted the torches through my window. 6 riders, maybe 7. They stopped at my property line, flames flickering in the growing dark, even though the sun hadn't fully set yet. Elwood Mathers. The voice belonged to Clyde Harwell, our town marshal. Known him since we were boys. We know you got something that don't belong to you. Best bring it out peaceful-like. I stood up slow, laid Hope in her drawer crib, and picked up my rifle. The Springfield '03 I'd carried in Korea. Still knew how to use it, though my hands shook worse when I was holding it these days. When I stepped onto that porch, the men went quiet. They were all there. Some I knew from the mill, some from church, some who'd never given me the time of day. Behind Marshal Harwell, sitting tall on a big black gelding, was a man in a suit. Even in the torchlight, I could see the money on him. Tailored coat, gold watch chain, boots that cost more than I made in a month. The man dismounted slow, like he owned the ground beneath his feet. Hell, he probably did. Most of Cypress Hollow belonged to one man or another, and this one looked like he owned more than most. "Mr. Mathers," he said, voice cold and smooth as creek ice. "My name is Oswin Pritchard, Judge Oswin Pritchard. And I believe you have my granddaughter." He let that hang in the air for a moment, watching my face. "That baby belongs to my family," he continued, taking a step closer. "She was misplaced, a terrible accident, but she's ours by blood and by law." His eyes were hard as railroad spikes. "And I aim to take her back, one way or another." Behind him, the men with torches shifted in their saddles, waiting to see what I'd do. My finger moved to the trigger guard on that Springfield. Not threatening, just ready. "She ain't property," I said, voice steady despite the shaking in my hands. "And she ain't going nowhere. Not while I'm still breathing." Judge Oswin Pritchard stood there in my yard like he was posing for a portrait. Tall man, silver hair slicked back, face that had never known a day of hard labor. Everything about him said money and power, from his tailored suit to the way he held himself, like gravity worked different for him than it did for the rest of us. "Mr. Mathers," he said again, voice smooth as whiskey. "Let's be reasonable men about this. That child is my flesh and blood, my daughter's baby. Surely you understand family rights supersede temporary arrangements." I kept that Springfield steady, though my hands wanted to shake. "What I understand is someone tied a baby in a sack and threw her in the creek to die. That ain't family. That's murder." The judge's face didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "You're making serious accusations. Accusations that could land a man in considerable trouble." He glanced at Marshal Harwell. "Isn't that right, Clyde?" The marshal shifted in his saddle. I'd known Clyde since we were boys, playing stickball behind the Baptist church. Good man, mostly. But he had a wife and 3 kids to feed, and the judge controlled most of the jobs in this county. "Now, Woody," Clyde said, and I could hear the apology already forming in his voice. "Nobody's saying you done wrong by pulling that baby out. That was a decent thing. But the judge here, he's got legal rights. He's the grandfather. And the law says—" "The law?" I cut him off. "The law says you can throw a baby away like spoiled meat?" "The baby wasn't thrown away," the judge said, voice tight now, patience wearing thin. "There was a miscommunication. My daughter Rebecca gave birth at home. We were told the child was stillborn, deformed, that she'd died. We had a service, Mr. Mathers. We mourned." He took another step forward. "Then today I hear rumors about a baby with a cleft lip found in the creek. My granddaughter's cleft lip. You can understand my urgency to reclaim what's mine." It was a good lie, smooth, practiced. If I hadn't seen that rope tied with a sailor's knot, if I hadn't seen how long that baby had been in the water, I might have even believed him. "Where's your daughter now?" I asked. "This Rebecca." "She here?" The judge's jaw tightened just slightly. She's resting. The loss of her child affected her deeply. She's been unwell. Bet she has. I lowered the rifle just a hair, but kept it ready. Tell you what, Judge, you bring your daughter here tomorrow. Let me hear from her own mouth that she wants this baby back. That she knew her child was alive and being drowned in a creek. You do that, and we'll talk. Behind the judge, I saw a few of the men exchange glances. Even in the torchlight, I could see doubt creeping in. Charlie Moss from the mill, old Silas Rowe the blacksmith, even Deputy Henderson. They were good men, most of them. Just scared men. Scared of losing their jobs, their homes, their place in this town. The judge's voice went cold. I don't negotiate with kidnappers, Mr. Mathers. That's what you are, legally speaking. You're holding my granddaughter against her family's wishes. Now I'm giving you one chance to end this peacefully. Hand over the child and we'll forget this unfortunate incident ever happened. No charges filed, no trouble for you. And if I don't? He smiled, but there wasn't any warmth in it. Then by tomorrow morning, I'll have Judge Parker sign an emergency custody order. Marshal Harwell will come back with that order and a dozen men. You can surrender the child then, or you can face kidnapping charges, unlawful detention, and whatever else I decide to throw at you. Your choice. Inside the cabin, I heard Hope start to fuss. Just a little sound, barely audible. But we all heard it. That tiny cry cutting through the night air. The judge's eyes fixed on my door. Is she in there? Let me see her. Let me see my granddaughter. No. I could have the marshal search your property right now. Clyde cleared his throat. Need a warrant for that, Judge, even for you. The judge turned slowly to look at the marshal. Just looked at him. Didn't say a word. But Clyde's face went pale in the torchlight. Course, Clyde added quickly, that warrant won't be no problem come morning. I could feel it slipping away, my right to protect her, my claim to keep her safe. These men had the law on their side, twisted as it was. They had money and power and connections. What did I have? A rifle, a haunted cabin, and a baby who'd called me to her with one word. The judge turned back to me. You have until noon tomorrow, Mr. Mathers. After that, things get difficult. For everyone. He mounted his horse with the easy grace of a man who'd never been told no in his life. Think about your future, your job at the mill, your place in this community. Think about what you're throwing away for a child that isn't even yours. The riders turned to leave, torches bobbing in the darkness. But Silas Rowe, the blacksmith, big man with hands like sledgehammers, he lingered just a moment, looked back at me, gave the smallest nod. So quick I almost missed it. Then they were gone, hoofbeats fading into the night, leaving me alone on my porch with a rifle in my shaking hands and a baby crying for me inside. I went in and picked up Hope. She stopped crying the moment I held her, her little hand reaching up to touch my face. Them blue eyes looking at me like I was the only solid thing in her world. Don't you worry, little one, I whispered. I ain't letting them take you. But even as I said it, I knew the truth. Come tomorrow noon, I'd be facing the full weight of the law, the judge's money, and a town too scared to stand with me. I had less than 12 hours to figure out how a broke-down veteran with shell shock could fight the most powerful man in 3 counties. I didn't sleep that night, just sat in my chair watching Hope breathe, that little wooden horse clutched in her hand even while she dreamed. Every sound outside made me jump. A branch scraping the roof, an owl calling, thunder shifting in his stall. My nerves were wound tighter than barbed wire. Come first light, I did what I always did. Made coffee, fed the baby, tried to pretend the world wasn't closing in. B showed up before breakfast with more supplies and a grim face. Whole town's talking, Elwood. Judge Pritchard spent half the night at the courthouse with Judge Parker. Word is the custody order's already signed. I poured her coffee without asking. She took it, hands wrapped around the cup like she was cold despite the August heat. There's something else, she said quietly. Something I should have told you yesterday, but I was scared. She looked at Hope, sleeping peaceful in her drawer. I delivered that baby 9 months ago, at the Pritchard estate. My hand stopped halfway to my mouth. You what? Judge paid me $500 to come out there in the middle of the night. His daughter Rebecca was in labor. He didn't want Doc Henderson involved, said it was a family matter. B's voice was shaking now. That baby came out screaming, healthy as could be. Just had that cleft lip. Judge took one look and his face went stone cold. Said the child was defective. Said it would ruin his family's name. And you left her there? He told me the baby died an hour after I left. B's eyes were wet. Paid me another $200 to sign a stillbirth certificate. Said Rebecca was hysterical, that it was better for everyone if we just said the baby never made it. I believed him, Elwood. I thought. She wiped her eyes. Then when you showed up yesterday with that baby, same age, same cleft lip, I knew. Lord help me. I knew what he'd done. Before I could respond, we heard horses, but just one this time. Silas rode dismounted slow, hands visible, showing he wasn't armed. Big man, 50-some years old, with a blacksmith's shoulders and a face weathered from forge work. He'd always been quiet in town, kept to himself and his wife Martha. Elwood, he called from the yard. Need to talk to you, just talk. I stepped onto the porch with the rifle, but kept it lowered. Say your piece, Silas. He looked around like he was checking for witnesses, then walked closer. I was at the creek that morning, early, checking my fishing lines. I saw Judge Pritchard's automobile parked on the old lumber road, right above where you found that baby. His voice was rough, like the words hurt coming out. Saw a man get out carrying something. Threw it in the water and drove off. Didn't think nothing of it at the time. Figured it was trash. But then last night, when the judge came riding up here with that story about miscommunication, he shook his head. That was a lie, Elwood. That baby was meant to die. You willing to testify to that? Silas's face went gray. Judge Pritchard holds the lease on my shop. One word from him, and me and Martha are on the street. I got nothing else, Elwood. Blacksmithing's all I know. He looked at the cabin, where Hope had started making her morning noises. But I couldn't stay quiet neither, so I'm telling you, you ain't crazy, and you ain't wrong. That man tried to murder his own granddaughter. Then help me fight him. I can't. The pain in his voice was real. But there's someone who can. Tom Bradley, the lawyer. He's in town today. He don't owe the judge nothing. Came from money himself, up in Memphis. He might take your case. Silas backed toward his horse. That's all I can do, Elwood. I'm sorry it ain't more. He rode off before I could answer, leaving me standing there with more truth but no more power. B touched my arm. He's right about Tom Bradley. I'll go get him. You stay here with Hope. The morning crawled by like a wounded dog. I tried to keep busy, changed Hope's diaper, fed her mashed carrots, played with her on the floor. She was laughing now, that torn lip not stopping her joy one bit. Kept reaching for my face, patting my cheeks with her little hands. Around noon I heard them coming. Not horses this time, wagons, lots of them. I looked out the window and felt my stomach drop. Wasn't just the judge and the marshal. Had to be 20, 30 people, men from the mill, women from church, even Reverend Collins in his Sunday blacks, Bible in hand. They'd brought the whole damn town. Marshal Harwell was in front, and he was carrying papers. The custody order, most likely. Behind him, on that black gelding, Judge Pritchard sat like a king surveying peasants. But there was someone else. A young woman, thin as a fence post, with dark circles under her eyes and blonde hair pulled back severe. She was looking at my cabin like it was on fire, and she couldn't look away. Rebecca Pritchard, the mother. I picked up Hope and held her close. She grabbed my collar and made her happy sound. Papa, clear as a bell. Outside, Marshal Harwell called out, Elwood Mathers, by order of Judge Parker, you are to surrender custody of the minor child immediately. Come out peaceful, and there won't be trouble. I looked at Hope, at them blue eyes trusting me completely, at that little smile that said I was her whole world. Then I looked at the crowd outside, 30 against 1, the law against an oath I'd made in my heart. I strapped on my gun belt, the one from Korea, and walked to the door. Elwood, don't, B whispered. But I was already moving. I stepped onto that porch with Hope in my arms and my pistol on my hip. The crowd went dead quiet. She ain't property, I said, voice carrying across the yard. Not while I'm breathing. You want her, you're gonna have to come through me, Judge Pritchard smiled. It was the smile of a man who'd already won. "So be it," he said, and nodded to the marshal. "Take the child. By force if necessary." That's when the first shot rang out. The shot came from the tree line, cracked through the air like lightning, and a chunk of porch rail exploded into splinters 6 inches from where I stood. Everyone scattered, men diving behind wagons, women screaming, horses rearing. I dropped to one knee, shielding Hope with my body, reaching for my pistol. But before I could clear leather, a voice called out from the woods. "Next one won't miss, Marshal. You put one hand on that man or that baby, and I'll drop you where you stand." I knew that voice. Moses Freeman, old black man who lived up in the hills, kept to himself mostly. Part Cherokee on his mama's side, part freedman, part mystery. Folks said he was near about 70, but he moved through them woods like smoke. Hunted with a rifle older than most people in town and never missed what he aimed at. Marshal Harwell had his hands up, face pale. "Moses, this is law business. Don't make this worse." "Law?" Moses stepped out of the tree line, rifle still aimed. "Law says you can murder babies now. That what we fought for?" Judge Pritchard's voice cut through the chaos, cold and controlled. "Marshal Harwell, arrest that man for assault with a deadly weapon." Nobody moved. "Now, Marshal." Clyde looked at the judge, then at Moses, then at me, holding Hope. I could see the war in his face, duty against decency, job against soul. "Go home, folks," Moses said, still not lowering his rifle. "This ain't your fight. Go on home before somebody gets hurt." The crowd started to break up. Slow at first, then faster. Wagons turning, people walking back toward town. Even Reverend Collins tucked his Bible under his arm and left without a word. Within 5 minutes, it was just the judge, the marshal, Rebecca still on her horse, and Moses with his rifle. Judge Pritchard's face was stone. "This isn't over, Mathers. Not by a long shot." He turned his horse and rode off, Rebecca following behind him like a ghost. Marshal Harwell lingered. "Woody, I gotta come back. You know that. I got a family to feed." "I know, Clyde. Do what you gotta do." After they left, Moses lowered his rifle and walked up to the porch. Up close, I could see how old he really was, face lined like a road map, hands gnarled with arthritis. But them eyes were sharp as ever. "You got yourself in a fix, Elwood Mathers." "Seems so." He looked at Hope, who was staring at him with interest, not fear. "Pretty baby, what they call her." "Hope." Moses nodded like that made sense. "My grandson works at the Pritchard place. Cleans stables. He hears things." He sat down on my porch steps, rifle across his knees. "Judge told his daughter that baby died. Beat her when she wouldn't stop crying for it. Locked her in her room for 3 months. That girl thinks her baby's dead, Elwood." I looked at Rebecca's departing figure in the distance. "Then why's she here?" "Because her daddy told her this morning there's been a terrible mistake. Told her the baby survived after all, and some crazy veteran stole it. Made himself the hero, made you the villain." Moses shook his head. "That girl don't know the truth. She's as much a victim as this baby here." B came out then, must have been hiding inside. "Elwood, Tom Bradley's in town. I sent word. He's coming." Tom Bradley showed up an hour later in a dusty Ford, carrying a leather briefcase that had seen better days. He was maybe 40, soft around the middle, with kind eyes and the patient manner of a man who'd rather talk than fight. "Show me the baby," he said. I brought Hope out. She'd just woken from her nap, hair sticking up, rubbing her eyes with her little fists. When she saw me, her whole face lit up and she reached out saying, "Papa," clear as day. Tom Bradley watched her for a long minute. "She's attached to you, and I to her." He sat down at my kitchen table and opened his briefcase. "Judge Pritchard's got the law on his side. Blood kin, family rights, all of it. But there's something else. Something old." He pulled out a book, pages yellowed with age. "Blood debt adoption. Goes back to the 1890s, before this county was even incorporated. Cherokee tradition that got written into territorial law and never removed." "What's it say?" "Says if a man saves another person's life, pulls them from fire, flood, or mortal danger, he has equal claim to that person as any blood relative, especially if the blood relative was the one who put them in danger in the first place." Tom looked up at me. You pulled this baby from the creek. You saved her life when her own family tried to end it. That gives you legal standing, Elwood. Not much, but some. For the first time in 2 days, I felt something like hope. Enough to fight him? Enough to make him have to prove his case in open court instead of just taking her by force. Tom closed the book. But it won't be easy. Judge Pritchard owns half the lawyers in this state and most of the judges. We'd need witnesses, real ones, people willing to testify that the baby was deliberately abandoned. I'll testify, B said from the doorway. Me too, Moses added. Seen that car by the creek? Tom nodded slowly. It's a start, but we'd need more. We'd need… A knock at the door interrupted him, hard, urgent. I opened it to find Silas Rowe standing there, hat in his hands, face stricken. Elwood, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. His voice was shaking. Judge came to my shop an hour ago. Said if I testify against him, he'll have my lease terminated by end of week. Me and Martha, we'll lose everything. Tears were running down his weathered face. I can't do it. I can't stand with you. I ain't got the courage. He turned and walked away, shoulders slumped like a man headed to his own hanging. Tom Bradley watched him go, then looked at me. That's what we're up against. He'll break anyone who tries to help you. That night, after everyone left, I sat with Hope in my lap. She was playing with that wooden horse, making little galloping sounds, completely unaware that her whole world was balanced on a knife's edge. B had stayed to help put her to bed. As we tucked her in, Hope grabbed both our hands and pulled them together, holding on tight. Then she smiled up at us and said something new. Mama. She was looking at B. B's face crumpled. She turned away, shoulders shaking, but I saw the tears. Tears for the daughter she'd lost, for the life she'd given up, for this child who'd somehow found a way into both our broken hearts. We can't win this, she whispered. Can we? Before I could answer, we heard horses again. But this time they stopped at the property line, didn't come closer. I looked out and counted torches, 12, 24, more, the whole town it seemed, just sitting there in the darkness, watching, waiting. And in the morning, Judge Parker's court would decide Hope's fate once and for all. The courthouse steps were packed by the time we arrived. Seemed like every soul in Cypress Hollow had turned out to watch Elwood Mathers get what was coming to him. Some faces were sympathetic. Old Charlie Moss from the mill nodded at me, but most just stared with that mix of curiosity and judgment you see at a hanging. Tom Bradley carried his briefcase like a shield. B walked beside me, holding Hope, who was fussing in the crowd noise. The baby kept reaching for me, saying Papa over and over, but Tom had said it'd look better if a woman held her during the proceedings. Judge Parker's courtroom was sweltering despite the morning hour. No air moving, just the smell of sweat and wood polish and fear. The judge, silver-haired, stern-faced, known for being fair but hard, sat behind his bench like Moses on the mountain. Judge Pritchard was already seated with his Dallas lawyer, a slick-looking man in a suit that probably cost more than my cabin. Rebecca sat beside them, hands folded in her lap, eyes down. She looked like a woman at her own funeral. All rise, the bailiff called, though we were already standing. Judge Parker banged his gavel once. Sit. Let's get on with this. It's too damn hot for theatrics. The Dallas lawyer stood first, smooth as butter, laying out the case like he was reading a recipe. Blood rights, family bonds, the Pritchard name and reputation. How a child belonged with her mother and grandfather, people who could provide education, opportunity, a proper Christian upbringing. And what can Mr. Mathers offer? The lawyer asked, gesturing at me like I was evidence of something distasteful. A man living alone in a cabin, no wife, no family, a documented history of shell shock and violent episodes from the war. He pulled out papers, hospital records from the VA showing treatment for combat trauma, night terrors, aggressive behavior. My hands started shaking. Couldn't help it. The whole courtroom saw. Your Honor, the lawyer continued, this man is clearly unstable. He's holding this child not out of love, but out of some misguided attempt to replace the family he lost. It's tragic, certainly, but it's not in the child's best interest. Tom Bradley stood up, but I could tell he was outmatched. Your Honor, my client saved this child's life. Found her drowning in Miller Creek, tied up in a sack like, allegedly tied up, the Dallas lawyer interrupted. We have only Mr. Mather's word for that. A man who, by his own admission, was alone in the woods early in the morning. For all we know, he found an abandoned baby and constructed this dramatic story to justify keeping her. That's a damn lie. I was on my feet before I knew it. Judge Parker's gavel cracked like a gunshot. Mr. Mathers, sit down, or I'll have you removed. Tom pulled me back into my seat. Let me handle this, he whispered. But it was already slipping away. I could feel it. The Dallas lawyer called witnesses, 3 men from the mill who testified I was strange, kept to myself. Sometimes came to work looking like he hadn't slept in days. The Reverend Collins took the stand and said with genuine sadness in his voice that while I was a good man, a child needs a mother in a stable home, not a bachelor with nightmares. Then they called Mrs. Henderson, the grocer's wife. She looked at me apologetically before speaking. It just ain't proper, Your Honor. An unmarried man raising a baby girl. People talk. And that poor child with her face the way it is, she'll need a mother to help her through the cruel world. Every word was a nail in the coffin. Tom called Bea to testify. She told the truth, all of it. How she delivered the baby at the Pritchard estate. How the judge had paid her to sign a false stillbirth certificate. How she'd seen that same baby, alive, when I brought her in from the creek. The Dallas lawyer tore into her. Mrs. Caldwell, you're not actually a licensed nurse, are you? You're a midwife, and you have a personal relationship with Mr. Mathers, don't you? You delivered his stillborn child. Isn't this just you trying to give him a second chance at fatherhood? No, and this payment you claim Judge Pritchard made, do you have any proof? A receipt? A bank record? Bea's face went pale. It was cash. How convenient. Tom tried to call Moses Freeman, but the old man wasn't there. I looked around the courtroom, no sign of him. My heart sank further. Tom presented the blood debt adoption law, that old territorial statute. Judge Parker looked at it, read it, then set it down with a sigh. Mr. Bradley, this law is over 60 years old. It hasn't been invoked in living memory. I'm not certain it's even still valid. But, Your Honor, I'll take it under consideration. The hearing lasted 3 hours. By the end, my shirt was soaked through with sweat and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Hope had fallen asleep in Bea's arms, peaceful and unaware. Judge Parker looked at me for a long moment. Mr. Mathers, I can see you care about this child, but caring isn't enough. A child needs stability, resources, a proper home. He picked up his gavel. I'm granting temporary custody to Judge Pritchard and his daughter Rebecca, pending a full custody hearing in 1 week's time. The child is to be surrendered immediately. The courtroom erupted. People talking, some cheering, some protesting. I couldn't hear any of it over the roaring in my ears. No, I said, but it came out as a whisper. A bailiff approached Bea. Ma'am, I need you to hand over the child. Bea looked at me, tears streaming down her face. Hope woke up, saw the stranger reaching for her, and started screaming. Papa! Papa! Mama! She was reaching for us, little hands grasping at air, face red and terrified. The bailiff took her anyway, carrying her toward Rebecca, who stood with her arms out but her face uncertain. Hope fought like a wildcat, screaming, kicking, calling for us. When Rebecca tried to hold her, Hope arched her back and wailed like her heart was breaking, because it was. We all heard it breaking. I tried to go to her. Tom and 2 deputies held me back. Elwood, don't, Tom hissed. You'll make it worse. But how could it be worse? I watched them carry Hope out of that courtroom, her screams echoing off the walls, her eyes locked on mine until the door closed. The courtroom emptied slowly. People avoided looking at me. Even Judge Parker left without another word. I sat there in the empty room, hands still shaking, and felt every piece of hope I'd built crumble into dust. Lost my wife and daughter once. Somehow found the strength to save another child. And now I'd lost her too. Elwood. Tom Bradley's voice was quiet. We still have the full hearing in a week. We're not done yet. But we were. I could feel it in my bones. The judge had money, power, the law. What did I have? Outside, I saw Moses Freeman standing by the courthouse steps. He caught my eye and gave the smallest shake of his head. Something had happened, something that kept him from testifying. That's when Silas Rose stepped out of the crowd. The blacksmith who'd been too afraid to stand with me, his face was set hard, jaw clenched. "Elwood Mathers," he said, loud enough for everyone still lingering to hear. "I got something to say." And I should have said it in there, but I was a coward. He turned to face the crowd. "I saw Judge Pritchard's automobile at the creek that morning. Saw a man throw something in the water. I know what I saw and I know what it means." The crowd went silent. "Silas," I said quietly, "your shop, your lease." "To hell with it," he said, voice breaking. "To hell with my shop and my lease and my fear. That man tried to murder a baby, and I stood by and let him take her back." He looked at me with tears in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Elwood. I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough sooner." For the first time all day, I felt something shift. Not hope exactly, but something close to it. Then we heard the sound. From the direction of the Pritchard estate, a baby's scream carrying on the wind. Hope, still crying for us an hour later. And in that moment, I knew. 1 week wasn't going to be enough time for her to forget us. 1 week wouldn't make her belong to them. But 1 week might be enough time for the judge to make her disappear for good. 3 days passed like years. 3 days of hope's screams carrying on the wind from the Pritchard estate. 3 days of me sitting on my porch with a bottle, trying to drown the sound of her calling for me. B came by every morning. Found me the same way each time. Hadn't shaved, hadn't eaten, hands shaking worse than ever. She'd clean up the empty bottles without saying a word, make coffee I wouldn't drink, sit with me while I stared at nothing. "You're killing yourself," she said on the third morning. "Good." She slapped me, hard enough my head snapped sideways. "You think she fought to live so you could give up? You think I'm watching you die too?" I looked at her then. Really looked. Saw the dark circles under her eyes, the way her hands trembled when she poured coffee, the weight she'd lost in just 3 days. "I can't beat him, B. He's got the law, the money, the whole damn town." "Then we find another way." She grabbed my face, forced me to meet her eyes. "Tom Bradley's been working night and day. Moses Freeman's been asking questions. Silas Rose been talking to people, even though it cost him his shop. Judge had the lease terminated yesterday. People are listening now. Elwood. People who weren't brave before are finding their courage." That afternoon, Moses showed up with news that turned my blood cold. "Judge is planning to move the baby," he said without preamble. "My grandson heard them talking. Day after tomorrow, soon as the roads dry out, they're taking Rebecca and Hope to Atlanta. Judge's brother lives there. He's a doctor, plans to have that cleft lip fixed. Then they'll say the baby's been with them the whole time. New birth certificate, new name, whole new story. He can't do that before the custody hearing. He can if there ain't no baby to have a hearing about." Moses sat heavily on my porch steps. "Once she's in Atlanta with new papers, you got no proof she's the same child. Just your word against a judge and a doctor." The fog in my head cleared like someone had thrown ice water on me. "We got 4 days. Less than that. And something else." Moses hesitated. "That mill foreman who testified against you? Carl Jenkins? He came to my place last night. Could barely stand, he was so drunk. Started crying, saying he couldn't live with it no more." I leaned forward. "Live with what?" "He's the one who threw her in the creek. Judge paid him $500 to handle the problem. Said he tied that sack tight enough to sink, but the rope must have caught on something. He's been drinking himself stupid ever since, trying to forget the sound of that baby crying." My hands clenched into fists. "Where is he now?" "That's the thing. He disappeared. Left his house, left his job, just vanished. Judge must have gotten wind he was talking." Moses looked at me with those sharp old eyes. "We need him, Elwood. He's the only witness who can prove what really happened. Without him, it's still just your word." Tom Bradley arrived an hour later with his own grim news. "Judge Parker's not going to honor the blood debt law. I've been researching precedents, but it's too old, Too obscure. He said as much when I tried to file supporting documents today. He set his briefcase down heavily. And I found out why Silas Rowe's testimony won't matter. Judge Pritchard's lawyer got 3 people to swear they saw Silas's truck nowhere near the creek that morning. They'll say he's lying to help you. 3 people willing to commit perjury, B said bitterly. 3 people who owe Judge Pritchard money, property, or favors. Tom rubbed his face. This is how he works. He owns enough people that truth doesn't matter. I stood up, steadier than I'd been in days. Something was crystallizing in my mind, a plan born of desperation and rage. Then we stopped playing by his rules. Elwood, what are you— I'm going to get Hope back. Tonight. Before he can move her to Atlanta. That's kidnapping, Tom said. You'll go to prison. Rather be in prison knowing she's safe than free knowing she's with the man who tried to kill her. B grabbed my arm. There has to be another way. Before I could answer, we heard a car coming up the road. Fast. Too fast for these dirt tracks. It skidded to a stop in my yard, and a woman got out. Thin, pale, moving like a sleepwalker. Rebecca Pritchard. She walked toward us like she was in a dream. When she got close enough, I could see her face was bruised, fresh purple marks along her jaw. Her lip was split. He hits her when she cries, Rebecca said, her voice flat and dead. My baby, my hope. She cries for you every night, and when I try to comfort her, she pushes me away. So he hits her, tells her to stop being difficult, says she needs to learn her place. The world went red at the edges. Yesterday, he hit her so hard she wouldn't stop screaming. That's when I knew. Her voice broke. I knew my father was going to kill her eventually. Whether it's with his fists or by making her disappear, he's going to kill my baby. She looked at me with eyes that had seen hell and chosen to walk through it anyway. I can't be her mother. She doesn't know me. She's terrified of me because I look like him. Tears were streaming down her face now. But I can save her, and I'm going to. She pulled an envelope from her pocket. This is a signed affidavit, everything. How he beat me when I told him I was pregnant. How he locked me up for months. How he told me my baby died when I could hear her crying in another room. How he paid Carl Jenkins to dispose of her. How he's been hitting her to make her stop crying for you. Tom Bradley took the envelope with shaking hands. Rebecca, if you sign this, your father will. I know what he'll do. I don't care anymore. She looked at me. She calls you Papa. That's who you are. That's who you've been from the moment you pulled her from that creek. She took a shaky breath. I'm testifying at the hearing. All of it. And after you win custody, I want— Her voice cracked. I want to visit sometimes, not as her mother. Just as someone who loves her. If you'll let me. For the first time in 3 days, I felt something other than despair. You'd be welcome. Always. Moses stepped forward. Miss Rebecca, you got somewhere safe to go? Your daddy finds out about this. I'm staying with Beatrice's father. I already asked him. She looked at B. If that's all right. B nodded, tears in her own eyes. Course it is, honey. Tom was reading through the affidavit, his face growing more serious with each page. This is everything we need. With this and Carl Jenkins' testimony. You won't get Carl Jenkins, Rebecca said quietly. My father had him killed 2 days ago. Made it look like he was drunk and fell in the creek. Same creek where he threw my baby. The silence was absolute. That's murder, Moses said. That's my father. Rebecca's voice was empty. He'll do anything to protect his name. Anything. Tom looked at me. The custody hearing's in 4 days. With this affidavit, we have a real chance. But Elwood, he hesitated. Judge Pritchard's not going to take this lying down. When he realizes what Rebecca's done, he'll come for all of us. Let him come. That night, I sat on my porch with my rifle across my knees, waiting. Sure enough, around midnight, I heard horses. But just one this time. Marshal Harwell dismounted alone, hands visible, showing he wasn't armed. Woody, he called, just want to talk. Talk then. He came closer, stopped at the bottom of my steps. In the moonlight, I could see the shame on his face. Rebecca Pritchard's missing. Judge is saying you kidnapped her. Wants me to bring you in. She came here of her own free will. You can ask B, ask Tom Bradley, ask Moses Freeman. All witnesses. Clyde nodded slowly. That's what I figured. That's why I'm here alone. He looked at his boots. I got a daughter. She's 12. Got polio when she was 6. Left her in a wheelchair. Every day I look at her, I thank God she's alive, even if she can't walk right. He looked up at me. Judge Pritchard threw away a baby because she wasn't perfect, and I stood with him. I'll carry that shame to my grave. He reached into his pocket. I tensed, but he pulled out his badge, set it on my porch step. I'm done. I can't serve that man no more. Can't serve a system that protects monsters and punishes decent folks. He backed toward his horse. Hearings Thursday morning. You make sure you're there, Elwood. Make sure you win, because if you don't, I reckon Judge Pritchard's gonna try to finish what he started, and this time, there won't be nobody to stop him. He rode away, leaving that badge glinting in the moonlight. 4 days until the hearing. 4 days to keep Rebecca safe, to keep hope alive, to somehow beat the most powerful man in 3 counties. From the direction of the Pritchard estate, I heard it, one last time. Hope's voice, faint but clear on the night wind. Papa. I was coming, little one. By God and my oath, I was coming. Thursday morning broke clear and hot. I stood in front of my mirror, razor in hand, and for the first time in a week, my hands were steady. Shaved clean, put on my one good suit, the one I'd worn to Emily's funeral, and tied my tie with the muscle memory of a man who'd once had a life that required such things. Bea knocked on my door just after sunrise. She had Hope with her. Rebecca brought her last night, Bea said quietly. Snuck out while the judge was sleeping. Said Hope needed to see you before the hearing. Said the baby hasn't stopped crying since they took her. Hope saw me, and her whole face transformed. She lunged out of Bea's arms, reaching, crying, Papa! Papa! Like her heart would burst if she couldn't get to me. I caught her and she wrapped around me like a vine, burying her face in my neck, little body shaking with relief. I got you, little one. I got you. She pulled back just enough to pat my cheeks with both hands, checking I was real. Then she smiled, that beautiful, broken smile, and said clear as a bell, Home. That's right, sweetheart. We're going home. All of us. The courthouse was even more packed than before. Word had spread about Rebecca's affidavit, about the marshal quitting, about Carl Jenkins dying in the same creek where he'd thrown a baby. The whole county had turned out to see how this story would end. Judge Pritchard sat at his table, face carved from granite. His Dallas lawyer looked less confident than before, kept shuffling papers, whispering urgently. Rebecca sat on our side of the room now, next to Moses Freeman and Silas Rowe. Her face was still bruised, but her back was straight. Judge Parker entered, and the room went silent. He looked older than he had a week ago, like this case had aged him. He sat down heavily and surveyed the packed courtroom. Before we begin, he said, I want to make something clear. I don't give a damn who your family is, how much money you have, or what kind of pressure you think you can bring to bear. In my courtroom, we deal in truth and law. Nothing else. He looked directly at Judge Pritchard. Is that understood? The judge's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Tom Bradley stood first. Your Honor, we have new evidence. Miss Rebecca Pritchard wishes to testify. Rebecca took the stand. Her hands shook as she was sworn in, but her voice was steady as stone. She told it all, every detail. The pregnancy from her father's business partner, she didn't use the word rape, but everyone understood. The months of isolation, her father telling her the baby had died. The sound of crying she heard from another room that her father said was her imagination, the bruises, the threats. Finding out just days ago that her baby had survived, only to watch her father try to break the child's spirit with his fists. He hit her, Rebecca said, tears streaming down her face. My baby girl cried for the man who saved her, and my father hit her to make her stop. That's when I knew. He'd rather kill her than admit he was wrong. The courtroom was dead silent except for the sound of Rebecca's testimony. Even the Dallas lawyer didn't try to cross-examine. What could he say? Then Tom called his next witness. Your Honor, I'd like to call Marshal Clyde Harwell to the stand. Clyde walked up slowly, no badge on his chest. He'd aged too, looked like he hadn't slept in days. Mr. Harwell, Tom said gently, you're no longer employed as marshal. Why is that? Because I couldn't serve a man who murders babies and witnesses. Clyde's voice was rough. Carl Jenkins came to me 3 days before he died. Told me Judge Pritchard paid him to throw that baby in the creek. Told me he couldn't live with it no more. I was going to bring him in to testify, but then he turned up dead. Drunk drowning, they said. But Carl hadn't touched a drop in 10 years. He was scared sober. Are you saying Judge Pritchard had Carl Jenkins killed? I'm saying Carl was fine one day and dead the next, right after he talked about testifying. And I'm saying when I tried to investigate, I got a visit from the judge telling me to let it go, to call it an accident and move on. Clyde looked at Judge Pritchard with contempt. So I quit. Rather be unemployed than complicit in murder. Judge Pritchard's lawyer shot to his feet. Your Honor, this is speculation and slander. There's no evidence. Sit down, Judge Parker said quietly. But there was steel in his voice. Sit down and be quiet while I decide if I'm going to hold your client in contempt or have him arrested. The lawyer sat. Tom called Moses Freeman next. The old man took the stand with dignity, told about seeing the judge's car at the creek, about the timeline matching when Hope was thrown in. Then Silas Rowe testified despite the 3 witnesses who'd sworn he was lying. I know what I saw, and I know I was a coward for not speaking up sooner, but I'm speaking now, and I'll swear to it on any Bible you put in front of me. One by one, others came forward. The mill worker who'd seen Carl Jenkins talking to Judge Pritchard the night before he died. The doctor who'd noticed the bruises on Rebecca's arms matched finger marks. Beatrice with her story of the payment and the false death certificate. By the time they were done, Judge Pritchard looked like a man watching his empire crumble. His lawyer kept trying to object, to redirect, to cast doubt. But the truth was piling up like stones, and there was no defense against it. Then Tom played his final card. Your Honor, I'd like to submit evidence regarding the blood debt adoption statute. I found 3 cases from 1891, 1903, and 1912 where this law was successfully invoked, including one case where a man who saved a child from drowning was granted custody over the child's biological father who had deliberately caused the drowning. He handed Judge Parker a stack of documents. The law is old, but it's valid, and it's been used in situations exactly like this one. Judge Parker read through the documents slowly. The courtroom held its breath. Finally, he looked up. Mr. Pritchard, do you wish to present a defense? The Dallas lawyer whispered urgently to the judge. Judge Pritchard shook his head, face gray. No, Your Honor. Then I'm ready to rule. Judge Parker removed his glasses and cleaned them slowly, deliberately. In my 30 years on this bench, I have never seen such a clear case of abuse, manipulation, and disregard for human life. Judge Pritchard, you disgust me. You've disgraced your office, your family, and your community. He put his glasses back on. Custody of the child known as Hope is hereby permanently granted to Elwood Mathers. Furthermore, I'm referring this case to the State Attorney General for investigation into the death of Carl Jenkins and the attempted murder of an infant. He banged his gavel. We're adjourned. And Oswin? He looked at Judge Pritchard. Don't leave town. The courtroom erupted. People cheering, crying, shouting. I just sat there, Hope in my lap, unable to move, unable to believe it was over. B grabbed my hand. Rebecca touched Hope's hair gently, and the baby didn't pull away this time, just looked at her birth mother with curious eyes. Thank you, Rebecca whispered, for saving her when I couldn't. Outside, the whole town seemed to be waiting. As we walked down the courthouse steps, people started clapping, slow at first, then building. Charlie Moss, Mrs. Henderson, even Reverend Collins, who testified against me, came forward with tears in his eyes. I was wrong, he said simply. Forgive me. Marshal Harwell, former Marshal Harwell, stood at the edge of the crowd. When I caught his eye, he nodded once. A warrior's acknowledgement. Then he walked away, headed for whatever life awaited a man who'd chosen honor over security. That night, sitting on my porch with Hope asleep in my arms and Bee beside me, I heard horses approaching. My hand moved toward my rifle, but Bee stopped me. "Look," she said. It was Moses Freeman, Silas Rowe, Tom Bradley, and a dozen other men. They were carrying lumber, tools, supplies. "Can't have a family living in a bachelor's cabin," Silas called out. "Figured we'd help you build proper. Room for a nursery. Maybe a room for a wife, if you were thinking along those lines." He grinned at Bee, who blushed like a schoolgirl. I looked at Hope, at Bee, at the men who'd found their courage and come to help build something good from something broken. "Reckon we could use the help," I said. But even as we celebrated, even as plans were made and futures took shape, one question remained. Judge Pritchard had vanished from the courthouse before the bailiffs could detain him, and men like that, cornered and desperate, were dangerous in ways the law couldn't always protect against. 2 weeks passed. The lumber for the new room sat stacked in my yard, but nobody had the heart to start building yet. Not while Judge Pritchard was still out there somewhere, a wounded animal with nothing left to lose. Rebecca had moved into Bee's father's house permanently. She came by every afternoon to see Hope, always gentle, never pushing. Hope was starting to warm to her. Would let Rebecca hold her now, even smiled when she sang lullabies. It was a strange kind of healing, watching a mother and daughter learn to love each other from scratch. The state attorney general had opened an investigation. Warrants were issued. But Judge Pritchard had vanished like smoke. His house stood empty, his bank accounts untouched. It was like he'd simply ceased to exist. Then, on a Tuesday morning, Moses Freeman came riding up fast. "He's at the church," Moses said, breathing hard. "Been there since before dawn. Reverend Collins found him sitting in the front pew. Says he wants to talk to you, Elwood. Just you." I strapped on my gun belt. Bee grabbed my arm. "Don't go alone. It's a trap." "Maybe, but I need to end this." I looked at Hope, playing with her wooden horse on the floor. "She can't grow up with this hanging over us." The church sat at the top of Main Street, white-clabbered with a tall steeple that could be seen from miles away. I'd been married there, buried Emily there. Now I was walking up those steps to face the man who'd tried to destroy everything I loved. Judge Pritchard sat in the front pew like Moses had said, but he wasn't the same man I'd faced in court. He'd aged 20 years in 2 weeks. Unshaven, rumpled suit, hands shaking. A bottle of whiskey sat on the pew beside him. "Mr. Mathers," he said without turning around. "Thank you for coming." I stayed near the door, hand close to my pistol. "Say what you came to say." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I came to apologize. Can you believe that? The great Oswin Pritchard apologizing to a broke-down veteran." He took a drink straight from the bottle. "My wife died giving birth to Rebecca. Did you know that? Bled out just like yours. And I looked at that baby girl, and all I could see was the thing that killed my Sarah. That ain't the baby's fault. No, but I blamed her anyway. Raised her hard, harder than I should have. Thought I was making her strong, but I was just making her afraid." He finally turned to look at me. "When she told me she was pregnant, all I could see was my failure. My daughter, unmarried, carrying a bastard child by a man who'd forced himself on her at one of my own business dinners. The shame of it consumed me. So you tried to kill an innocent baby?" I told myself I was protecting my family's name, protecting Rebecca from a life of disgrace. His voice broke. But I was just protecting myself, my pride, my reputation, and in doing so, I lost everything worth having. He stood up slowly, swaying slightly. "I came here to make you an offer. I'll confess to everything. Carl Jenkins' murder, the attempted murder of my granddaughter, all of it. I'll testify that Rebecca and you had nothing to do with any of it. I'll clear your names completely." "In exchange for what?" "Let me see her, just once. Let me hold my granddaughter and tell her I'm sorry for what I did." Tears were streaming down his face now. "Then I'll turn myself in. I'll face whatever punishment comes. I need her to know I'm sorry." I should have said no. Should have walked away. But I thought about Hope, about how she'd grow up someday and want to know her story. And I thought about my own father, who I'd never gotten to forgive before he died, and how that regret still ate at me. "I'll ask Rebecca," I said. It's her choice, not mine. Rebecca came to the church an hour later carrying Hope. The baby had fallen asleep on the ride over. When Rebecca saw her father, she stopped in the doorway. "Papa," she said, and the word was full of decades of pain and longing and loss. Judge Pritchard stood there, this man who'd built an empire on fear and control, and wept like a child. "I'm sorry, Rebecca, for all of it. For making you afraid to be loved. For taking your baby from you. For—" His voice broke completely. "For not being the father you deserved." Rebecca walked forward slowly. "You can hold her, just for a minute." She placed Hope in his arms. The baby stirred, opened her eyes, and looked up at this stranger. For a moment I thought she'd cry, but then she did something none of us expected. She smiled and reached up to touch his wet face. "Sad," she said clearly, one of her new words. "Sad." Judge Pritchard held her close and sobbed into her hair. "Yes, baby girl. Grandpa's very sad. But you're perfect. Just perfect." After a minute, Rebecca took Hope back. The judge wiped his eyes and straightened his shoulders. "Marshal Harwell's outside. I asked him to meet me here. I'm ready to confess now." He walked to the door, then turned back one last time. "Mr. Mathers, raise her with love. Teach her that she's worthy, no matter what anyone says. Don't make my mistakes." "I won't." 3 months later, the town gathered for a wedding. Nothing fancy, just friends and neighbors packed into that same church where Judge Pritchard had made his confession. Hope was the flower girl, toddling down the aisle in a white dress that Silas Rowe's wife had sewn special. She carried a basket of wildflowers and threw them everywhere except where she was supposed to, making everyone laugh. When it came time for the vows, I looked at Bea and saw my whole future in her eyes, a future I'd thought was dead and buried with Emily. But love, it turns out, doesn't end. It just grows new roots in new soil. "I do," I said, and meant it with everything I had. "I do," Bea said, and Hope clapped her hands and shouted, "Mama, Papa," loud enough for the whole congregation to hear. After the ceremony, Rebecca came up to us. She'd started teaching at the school, was rebuilding her life piece by piece. "I have something for you," she said, and handed me a small wooden box. Inside was a ring, simple gold band, worn smooth with age. It was my mother's. She died when I was born, but my father kept it all these years. He left it for me in his cell before—" She didn't finish. Didn't need to. Judge Pritchard had hanged himself in his jail cell 2 weeks after his confession, unable to live with what he'd done. He wanted Hope to have it someday when she's grown, to remember that even people who make terrible mistakes can find redemption at the end, that love can exist alongside regret. Rebecca touched the ring gently. "And he wanted you to know that in those last moments, holding her, he finally understood what family really means." I closed the box carefully. "I'll make sure she knows." That evening, after all the guests had gone home and the sun was setting gold over the hills, I sat on my porch with my wife beside me and my daughter in my lap. Hope was playing with that wooden horse I'd carved the day I found her, now worn smooth from 2 years of loving. "Tell story," she said, looking up at me with those blue eyes. "Again? I just told it last night." "Again, Papa, please." So I told her the story one more time. About a cowboy who heard a tiny voice calling for help. About a baby who fought to live when the whole world said she shouldn't. About people who found their courage when it mattered most. About chosen family and second chances and love that refused to die. When I finished, Hope smiled her beautiful, imperfect smile and said the words that made everything worth it. "Happy ending." "That's right, little one. Happy ending." But even as I said it, I knew the truth. This wasn't an ending at all. It was a beginning. I'm an old man now. 72 come November, and these hands shake worse than they did back in 52. But when I hold my granddaughter, Hope's little girl, born just last spring, I remember clear as creek water the day I pulled her mama from that burlap sack. Hope's grown now, 30 years old, married to a good man who loves her something fierce. That scar on her lip is barely visible anymore, but she never hid it. Says it's her fighting mark. Proof she survived when the world said she shouldn't. She became a social worker, spends her days helping children nobody else wants. Says every time she looks at a scared kid in a foster home, she sees herself floating in that creek, waiting for someone to care enough to pull her out. B passed 2 years ago, went peaceful in her sleep, holding my hand like she'd done every night for 28 years. I miss her every day. But I see her in hope, in that fierce love, that refusal to give up on people, that belief that family ain't about blood, it's about who shows up when the world says run. Judge Pritchard died in that jail cell, but his daughter Rebecca found a kind of redemption. She and Hope have coffee every Sunday morning, and sometimes I join them. We don't talk about the past much. Don't need to. We all carry the scars, but we don't let them define us. I learned something in all this, something I wish I'd known when I was younger. Dignity don't come from what you're born with or who your family is. It comes from what you do when nobody's watching, from standing up when it's easier to sit down, from choosing love when fear would be simpler. If you've ever felt thrown away, if you've ever been told you weren't good enough because of something you couldn't control, if you've ever wondered if fighting for what's right was worth the cost, I'm here to tell you it is. Every single time. Family is who you choose when the world says you got no choice. And love? Love is pulling someone from the creek even when your hands are shaking, even when you're scared, even when everyone says let go. If this story touched you, I'd be honored to know where you're listening from. Maybe you got your own story of chosen family, of finding love in broken places, of second chances that changed everything. Until next time, friends, may your dignity carry you through whatever storms come, and may you always have the courage to pull someone from the creek when you hear them calling, even if all they can whisper is one word, Mama.